The ninth season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO for our ninth season. From rural Nebraska towns all the way over to China, there is an organization in Omaha that is looking at trying to get citizens and governments to do what they call intelligent urban planning. Sound pretty highfalutin? Well, not really when you get down to it. My guest this week is Cecil Stewart. He is the president and CEO of the Jocelyn Castle Institute. A very fine-sounding kind of organization.
Well, thank you, Carol.
You're based in the old Jocelyn Castle campus.
On the estate, yes.
Here in Omaha, which is a state historical landmark, the castle itself. And really, it's kind of significant that you're there. You are Dean Emeritus of the College of Architecture at UNL, and you could be spending your days consulting at high fees, I'm sure, around the world, but you're doing something special. So let's just start out with kind of this mission that you're on.
Well, I feel some days like a missionary and other days like a beggar. But the reason that we started the Institute was because of a felt need for conversation about a fullness and a richness of urban planning, of community development, that the discussions were not taking place between private individuals and government representatives, between decision leaders and citizens. So what we thought we might be able to do through looking at design and planning and development is heighten the level of conversation about 5 specific areas that we think it takes to be successful if you're looking for a sustainable environment for a community. The first is environmental issues, and that doesn't mean that we started out to be or were tree huggers. In fact, we've had to get over some of that feeling from time to time. The second would be the social cultural conditions of a community, a place. And the third would be what technologies are we using or can we use to better facilitate the life and well-being of a community. The fourth would be, of course, economics.
How much dough you've got?
How much do we have and how much can we get? And what will it take? And what is the long-term investment as contrasted to only a short-term view that typically is at the heart of economics? And finally, the fifth area is public policy. We often overlook the fact that our public policies that determine the condition of a community today, probably most of those policies were put in place at the turn of the century in Industrial Revolution times when all of these other domains were very different. We didn't care about the environment. We only cared about the economics. We didn't care too much about the social, cultural lives of some parts of our population. And now the idea is to look at these 5 domains simultaneously, one trading off onto the other, and see if we can't overcome some of these unintended consequences about the bad things that happen to communities.
Okay, well let's, obviously the unintended consequences are the kinds of things that spurred you and the people working with and for the Jocelyn Castle Institute. Let's talk about, over the last 50 years, let's say, what were some of these unintended consequences?
Well, one of the major unintended consequences is the area that growing communities cover.
Are you talking about urban sprawl?
I am talking about urban sprawl. I make presentations often in Omaha, and I always ask the audience, what is the period of time that you remember when Omaha really was a working, functioning, fun place, easy to get around in, easy to get to and from your job, And if the audience is old enough, as old as I am at least, they would say probably sometime in the 60s. In the 60s, if you looked at a map of Omaha, it was a very compact community. There were still streetcars. There were alternatives for transportation to get to whatever place your destination was. Today, we've given over to only the automobile. We've given over to large yards, suburban development that houses only about 3.5 buildings per acre. And the extremities of the city keep getting further and further away from the core. And the core, another unintended consequence, no one ever wanted the heart of a city to deteriorate, but it has. And so now there's major reinvestment, new costs, new economics to keep the center alive. And one of the questions is, can we afford, both environmentally, economically, and all the other reasons, to continue to allow this sprawl to take place at the edge?
Well, let me play devil's advocate a little bit. We're only giving people what they want. People, incomes have gone up, their ability to buy things. Maybe they always did want to live on a quarter acre of ground with a big house, but now the economic means are there to do that. And this is a natural progression for a city.
Well, it's been natural in the United States, but it's not been natural the world over. And there are many cities that you would visit and point to, like London, Paris, maybe for some of us even Hong Kong. You would find how well they work without the automobile edges and tentacles just going off.
But
the
you're
countryside.
fighting a losing battle on that. My Lord, look at when they tried to say we shouldn't have so many SUVs because they burn a lot of gas, and they're not quite as safe under certain conditions, and people just wouldn't. They aren't giving that up for anything except maybe now since we've had a couple
Katrina.
of hurricanes and a few things to drive the gas up. But even then, there's not going to be a paradigm shift in that whole automobile thing.
Well, Carol, I think there's an ad on TV that says your point of view is determined by your perspective. What we're trying to do is to show that there is another perspective, not to take away the pleasures, but to enhance and improve quality of life, enhance and improve convenience, give people back more time. How many times will you hear some of the same people who live in the suburbs and drive the large vehicles in order to be the bus for the family and the school events and so forth, say, I don't have any time. Where has all the time gone? I think we're trying to suggest that urban form, has a direct relationship to quality of life, to the economics, to maintaining our environment. Why do we live in the midst of the most fertile agricultural land in the world and raise very little food for people? This is a question that we are trying to bring before the urban community as well as the rural community.
Well, let's talk about the difference between what is already here and what is yet to come. The what is already here is something that you and others, let's take Omaha as an example, have worked from different places. I mean, your institute, other individuals that have been interested in trying to get us to not let, well, two things to happen. Not let our inner city fall down any worse than it is, and help build up areas that are very buildable and very economically, feasibly buildable.
Or to rebuild some places.
And the other is to, as we are putting up new, to make it make more sense in the long term. That it's not be, number one, quality improves, so that you're not getting these little mini ghettos.
Last longer.
And making the design more interesting, pleasing to the eye, more visually environmentally, through the senses, more pleasing.
Right.
Are we making headway in that?
I think we're making great headway. We've had a number of colleagues and a number of visitors who spend a lot of time worrying with these same issues in other cities, and invariably they say, whether we're looking at Omaha or Lincoln, they will say, you haven't gone too far yet. You're
not past the point of no return.
Not past the point of no return. You're not in as bad a shape as Atlanta, for instance, Phoenix, for instance, other places that are truly, really discovering that they have to change their principles and their planning attitude. I know I've now lived in Nebraska for 32 years, and it was somewhat of a surprise to me to find out that use of the word planning 30 years ago was almost next to cursing your mother. It was a bad word in many quarters. But I think we're waking up to the fact that land use controls, even in the rural communities, for noxious odors and unwanted environmental conditions because of certain economic activity, is something that we have to think about collectively. I, as an individual, cannot control all of those things. We have to count on our collective will and our collective political freedoms to take care of some of those.
Now, there's a saying, money talks and other things walk.
Right.
And money does fuel, development does fuel the economy in a city. Mm-hmm. And in my experience watching at least the Omaha planning operation, how something comes to the planning board and the planning department, some developer, and there's always this tendency, and I'm not saying the developer runs the show, but I would say it appears that way much. We do not want to do anything to hurt development, because that's where our bread is buttered, is by the new stuff. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps the engine, the money turning over 7 times or whatever in the community.
Right.
And so when something comes to the planning board and the city council, very seldom do they shake the trees, so to speak. Of course, there's not trees on those new places yet, but there's not a lot of questioning about the trend that we're taking in a community.
Well,
they'll look at that project and say, well, is anybody ticked off about any part of it?
I think that reticence and that history of behavior is what brought us Omaha by Design.
Give us a little explanation for those that aren't familiar.
A group of folks in Omaha decided that there was one tipping point development that really was more than they thought was a benefit to the community, even with the economic return. Most of the commercial development in our recent history in these cities has been rather for short-term gain rather than long-term quality investment. And when you're looking at short-term gain, you're not terribly concerned about...
You mean big ugly boxes?
Boxes, yes, specifically. Just put it in plain English. You're not terribly concerned about design and aesthetics. You're not terribly concerned about the quality of materials and the life condition of those buildings and projects. You're not terribly concerned about the environment that you may be influencing in a negative way. So you get to a point and the community says, wait, no more. The communities that we see, speaking for folks who created the Omaha by Design program, the communities that we see that are attracting quality development are doing it very differently. They have design standards. They are forced to look in a review sort of way against a certain specific set of criteria, that if you're going to develop in this community, these are conditions that we expect you to meet. My point is that new is not bad, new is good, but new that is for only short-term economic gain is usually bad.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this sort of impetus came because a rather large chunk of land became available to commercial folks that were building commercial operations, retail generally. And it was in the middle of already developed area.
Right.
So there was probably more stakeholders actually that could see the effect of that
It's
immediately.
in my front yard.
And were concerned about it. That doesn't always happen when we move into the suburbs,
When you let them
when there's nobody
take
on the other side.
raw agricultural land, you're correct. And that is the easiest place for developers to work.
But the good thing was this spot did create an interest in this topic, and the number of people living around it that would be immediately affected became vocal. I mean, the timing was right. I mean,
Right.
as you say, the tipping point was
and
reached.
you have almost accidentally therein a process that we believe should go on with every project. Every project has some public investment. Every development project has some public impact.
Well, when you talk about the streets and the sewers and the traffic lights and the change in the traffic patterns that the city has to foot the bill for, and the
Right.
city being us,
Yes.
that already exist as taxpayers,
Exactly.
then we should have the right to determine
We are
the
stakeholders.
fate of that.
Indeed. And yet we very seldom are called to the table or have an opportunity to be at the table unless, as in this particular project, it was a crisis and they came to the table, invited it or not.
So have we learned anything from that in this community about?
Well, I think we have. I think we wouldn't have the Omaha by Design with some public policy recommendations for change that are emerging out of that condition. We wouldn't have had the design analysis and the visioning that went on.
Give
we-
our viewers some examples of specific things that came out of that in terms of the kind of standards and recommendations.
Well, you have new standards for neighborhoods. You have new standards for the right-of-way conditions that there always be sidewalks and
And setbacks and
setbacks
green
and
space and
landscape in the right-of-way. Where there's watershed areas involved, there's new standards for flood control as well as green space and recreation. There's new standards for material use on major buildings and how they front the street and relate to the pedestrian environment. These are all very important conditions that will give us this aesthetic image of a place that is here to stay. It's not just for passing through or for overnight living.
until the cheap construction wears away, and then we all just have an eyesore that we can't deal with.
Well, if it's been put up cheaply.
Not everyone is, but there
No,
have been in the
right,
past.
Right, indeed. But I think we are beginning to know the difference. A part of what my institute is about is to bring information on best practices from other places, not saying this is what you must do, but saying, here, look, this is another vision, this is an alternative. And one of the other objectives that we have is to pull people together in stakeholder kind of atmosphere with a vision of certain visions that they can work from, play off of, and add their own image to what they think the best future should be. This is all about dreaming in the first instance and then putting into place the policies and the activity that will lead to those final projects. I think every developer that wants to stay in business wants to do the best job possible within the framework of the economics and the policy environment that they're working in. And yet, it may be because they haven't studied the alternatives to know what brought that about in some other location. That's information that we can bring and are bringing.
Are they paying
to
attention?
project. Yes, I think so. I think so. The Drake Court downtown is one of
And
the.
we should explain what that is. These are old apartment buildings that were in the downtown, just west of what you consider downtown Omaha today, and they were buildings built with a courtyard in the middle, and they became, havens for people to sleep in, the renting, as they say, and there were fires there, but they were structurally incredibly sound. Take it from there.
They were very sound buildings, and they actually had been put on the National Register for Historic Places. Coincidentally, Johnny Carson used to live in the Drake Court.
I did not know that, as
well,
you would say.
I've brought new information to you. The Drake Court was in its heyday in the 1920s, roughly, and 14 buildings that were put up. They were the best multiple family living environment near to downtown. You could walk to work. You could even walk to South Omaha from there. You could walk to what is now the old market. It was Jobbers Canyon. Many employment opportunities were within walking distance of those apartments. Well, we were asked to take what would call a pre-development look at the area and offer some visions for not just the 14 buildings, but the district where they sit. And by giving the city and the potential development community some views of what might happen, I think one influence that came out of that was that the Omaha Public School System decided to build its first new downtown elementary school on the Drake Court property. That gives you reinforcement for family context in the heart of the city.
Community.
Community, indeed, and the school itself becomes an anchor in this as a new living community. Downtowns used to be commercial parts of community. Now, the word that I prefer to use is downtowns have become an urban village. You can live there, you can shop there, you can walk there, you can recreate there, you find all of your daily needs if you're looking at the planning in a comprehensive way. And when you do that, you add to high quality life.
We only have about 5 minutes left. A couple of other things. When you talk about building out on the outskirts of a city where land is plentiful, it is a temptation. It's part of the American dream now as it's developed to have that big lot. And yeah, it may take a while for the trees to grow, but to have, that, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, can you?
I think the genie's probably going to be stuffed back in the bottle.
By?
Energy costs. I think it's going to be in, maybe not in my lifetime, but it's certainly in my children's lifetime, when there need to be more choices available so that families are not spending a higher percentage of their income on energy. And that goes for every...
And that's for the house of a house, too.
Yes.
I mean,
Size.
keeping it warm and cool, and not just driving to and from it.
Size of the original house, operation of the house, driving to and from the house, buying products that have to be delivered from long distances. It's another reason why we are trying to facilitate urban and rural coalitions, is to bring back, we've been so disconnected from our food system. My children don't have a clue as to where their food comes from.
Mine comes from South America, I think.
You're
Most
right.
of my fruits and vegetables.
It's been said that the average bite of food on your plate in the Midwest travels 1,500 miles to get there. Average. That means some of it's traveling twice that far. Well, can we afford that? How can we plan now to not destroy our economy, not destroy our quality of life, and still live within our natural system's means?
Okay, now I'm going to jump farther out of the city to the next city. We have about 3 minutes left. There's, you know, we're increasing the number of lanes on the interstate between Omaha and Lincoln. We want Omaha and Lincoln to reach some magic status so that we can get more federal funding, be a little mini megalopolis.
Right.
We've not discussed light rail between Lincoln and Omaha anymore. Are you trying, you and people like you, trying to create more discussion? I mean, because, you know, nature abhors a void, and that will fill.
Sure. There has to be discussion on the transportation system, and again, it's alternatives and choices. Do we have a choice? I live in Lincoln. The Institute is here in Omaha. 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, I'm on the interstate back and forth. If I had the choice to spend that hour on somebody else carrying me while I can do work, while I can read, I would take that choice. But even if I had the rail system in between, there's no end there. There has to be a functioning sub-transportation system at each end
To take you out from
to get
the
me
ends.
from the end of the line to
Where
the
you need to
Jocelyn
go.
Castle, for instance.
Well, but that is really not going on at all.
It's only being fantasized. It's not being seriously planned. And yet, maybe this new commission for the analysis of the economic value of the interstate corridor that the legislature passed in this last session, maybe they will open up the question
To all the stakeholders.
to all the stakeholders, we can hope.
We have about a minute left. If you were, you know, the magic mastermind of city planning in, let's say, this part of the world, Omaha, Lincoln, eastern Nebraska, what would you have happen?
Well,
Briefly.
briefly, a minute or less. The first thing I would do would be to try to find out what the people who live here want to have happen. Not in only one of those 5 domains, but in each of them. I would do everything I could to try to engage our communities in discourse about the environment, economics, social conditions, etc. Second thing I would do would be every time there is a solution suggested, I would demand that there be more than one problem solved by one solution.
Sounds good. That's just a beginning, though, right?
Just the
If
beginning.
you want to know more about the Jocelyn Castle Institute, www.ecospheres.com. Thank you very much, Cecil, for joining us.
Thank you for
and
having me.
thank you for joining us this week on Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.